Hi there, I'm Jim, and today we're diving into one of the most sensitive and important topics in relationship psychology. What really happens when someone with an avoidant attachment style starts to see you as the one? Maybe you felt stuck in a relationship that lacked commitment. Maybe you've loved someone who kept pulling away every time things got close. But then, something shifts. Rare, yet unmistakable. An avoidant stops running and slowly begins to open up, sending signals most people miss if they don't know what to look for. In this video, I'll walk you through subtle yet powerful signs that your avoidant partner is no longer in retreat mode, but actually beginning to love you with seriousness, trust, and long-term intent. If you've ever wondered whether they're truly in it or just temporarily more comfortable, then this is the video you can't afford to skip. Hit subscribe so you don't miss what's next, and stay with me until the end, because I'll also be sharing how to stay rooted in your worth without sacrificing your self-respect just to feel loved. One of the very first and most meaningful signs that an avoidant partner is truly getting serious about you is this: they begin to feel comfortable letting you take the lead in the relationship. It may seem small on the surface, but for someone whose entire emotional survival has revolved around staying in control, this is a huge shift. In the past, you may have felt like everything had to move at their pace. They decided when to meet, when to open up, when it was okay to call it a relationship. Anytime you tried to introduce more closeness, a weekend trip, a holiday plan, meeting your family, they'd respond with delays, vague language, or a classic, "Let's see how things go." It wasn't because they didn't care. It was because, for avoidance, losing control often feels like losing emotional safety. Taking the lead means exposure, vulnerability, risk, so they keep things slow and measured to protect themselves. But then, something changes. You suggest a plan for the weekend, and instead of hesitating, they respond calmly. "That sounds nice. Whatever you want to do, go ahead and plan it." You mention wanting to bring them to your family's Thanksgiving dinner, and they reply, "Okay, let me know what I need to bring." There's no struggle for control, because now they trust you. And more importantly, they trust this relationship. Let's be clear, this isn't passivity, it's peace. They're still present, still involved, but they're no longer bracing against intimacy. They're allowing you to lead without needing to slow everything down. This is a deeply telling sign that they're beginning to shed the armor. They're learning to share space, share decisions, and share life, things that once felt overwhelming to them. If you're witnessing this shift, take a moment to appreciate it. It's not just comfort, it's trust. And for an avoidant, trust is never given lightly. When they let you steer, what they're really saying is, "I believe you won't take me somewhere I don't belong." And then, as they begin to feel safer with you, not just safe enough to release control, but safe enough to give, you'll notice something even more touching. They start to naturally prioritize your feelings and needs. You don't have to remind them. You don't have to teach them how to love you. They begin to observe you more attentively. They notice what makes you smile, what brings you comfort, what you've casually mentioned but never expected them to remember. These aren't grand gestures or flashy performances. On the contrary, they're often subtle, and that's what makes them so meaningful. Like when they know you have an early meeting the next day and gently suggest you get to bed early, or when they hand you their jacket on a flight because you once said you get cold on planes. For an avoidant, this is a big shift. They're used to living in their own rhythm, where self-preservation was always the top priority, and other people's emotions often felt overwhelming, not because they're heartless, but because they learned to protect themselves by shutting down. They noticed things, but from a distance. They listened, but didn't let themselves feel too much. But once they realize that you're not here to control them, you're here to walk with them, something begins to shift in their way of relating. They start to find joy in making you feel seen and cared for. It's no longer a chore. It becomes something they want to do. It's not just checking boxes, it's intention, and you can feel it. In the look they give you, in the small gesture, in the way they rearrange their day just to make time for you. Here's what's essential to understand. For someone with an avoidant style, change rarely comes in light switch moments. It comes in inches. But if you're paying attention, it becomes undeniable. They're shifting from, I need to protect myself, to, I want the person I love to feel loved. They begin including you in personal decisions, not just those involving the relationship, but the bigger ones too. They ask, what do you think if I change jobs? Not because they can't decide on their own, but because your opinion now matters in the world they once kept closed off. This is the moment to pause and recognize. The one who once feared closeness is now inviting you in. Not with big speeches, but with actions. And that quiet shift? That's love speaking loudest of all. Then, after they've begun prioritizing your feelings without being asked, you'll notice another quiet but powerful shift. They no longer get emotionally triggered when you bring up serious conversations. If you've ever loved an avoidant, you know what it's like to touch the off-limits zone. The moment you bring up the future, moving in together, marriage, shared finances, or even just, where is this going? You'd feel them freeze up, get defensive, irritated, or completely shut down. They didn't want to talk, didn't want to think about it, and if you pushed, they'd start pulling away. Not because they didn't care, but because commitment to them once meant losing control, being trapped, or getting hurt. But once they feel emotionally safe with you, when they know you're not trying to rush them, change them, or force them into someone they're not yet ready to be, their reaction begins to soften. Now, you can bring up things that used to make them want to run, and they don't push back. You might ask, do you think we'll ever live together someday? And instead of dodging, they look at you calmly and say, yeah, I think that's totally possible. No tension, no wall, no heavy sigh. Just a grounded answer and a steady presence. The real shift isn't in the content of their answer, it's in how they respond. Before, they heard your words and felt threatened. Now, they hear your words and feel trusted. And when they feel trusted, they want to respond in kind. What's worth noting is, they still may not be ready for that next step, but more importantly, they're not afraid to talk about it. They sit with it, they listen. They're no longer treating your feelings as threats to their freedom. They're beginning to understand, when you talk about the future, you're not trying to trap them, you're inviting them into something safer. And in this stage, the relationship breathes easier. You're no longer tiptoeing. You don't have to carefully script your words just to ask something you have every right to ask. You get to be honest. And for the first time, they can stay with you in that honesty without needing to run. This is one of the most profound shifts in avoidant healing. From emotional reactivity to emotional regulation for the sake of connection. They may not have all the right words, but they're staying, they're listening, they're learning. Your needs no longer feel like burdens. They're becoming part of what it means to truly care. And you'll feel that not just in their words, but in their eyes, their tone, and their new willingness to show up in ways they never could before. Then, when serious conversations are no longer threats, but spaces of connection, you'll notice another subtle yet deeply significant shift. The things that used to upset them no longer seem like a big deal. At first, this might confuse you, because when you look at yourself, you realize you haven't changed that much. You still send a follow-up text if they haven't replied. You still feel a little anxious when they seem distant. You still ask things like, are you okay? Or, is something wrong? The very questions that once visibly irritated them. And yet now, they don't snap. They don't pull away. They don't say things like, you're suffocating me, or I need space. Instead, they respond with more calm. Sometimes they'll explain directly, I'm in a meeting, I'll call you after. Other times, a simple message, no worries, just a long day. They don't just respond, they reassure. So what changed? Not you, them. They've begun to regulate their emotional responses differently. They no longer view your reactions as threats. They don't interpret your needs as signs that they're being controlled or smothered. They understand now, you're a person with feelings, and they want you to feel safe. So instead of defensiveness, they respond with emotional regulation. Instead of frustration, they choose patience. This doesn't mean they no longer have boundaries. But instead of building walls, they learn to set limits with kindness. They might still say, I'll call you after work. But it's not to shut you out, it's to stay connected. They're not shutting down, they're engaging. This is a huge step in avoidant healing, because in the past, intimacy felt threatening. When you needed more, they withdrew. When you showed fear, they felt accused. But now, They're beginning to understand. Emotions aren't battles. They're bridges to deeper understanding. You'll notice the shift in how they show up. Before, whenever you expressed worry, it was like they unplugged emotionally. Now, they stay present. They may not always have the perfect words, but they don't abandon you. And that, from someone who once shut every emotional door, is a powerful sign of real love. You might still be your sensitive, anxious self at times, but the difference now is they can stay with you in those moments without crumbling inside themselves. And when you see them navigate situations that used to be trigger zones with calmness and cooperation, it doesn't just make you feel safer, it shows you, clearly, that this person is emotionally growing right here in the relationship with you. When someone who once got emotionally triggered by your vulnerability now stays grounded beside you, that's already a turning point. But soon after, you may notice another quiet yet powerful shift. They begin to ask for your input on important matters, even when you haven't brought them up. And it's not the casual, "Do you like this shirt?" type of question. It's the deep, future-oriented kind. "I've been thinking about changing jobs. What do you think?" Or, "I'm considering selling the house. Do you think this is a good time?" Or even, "If we have kids someday, what kind of environment do you think would be best?" You don't need to hint. You don't need to suggest. They come to you, not just to inform you, but to consult you. And that simple act reveals a massive leap in their emotional development. Because here's the thing, they used to live believing they had to handle everything alone. Their inner world was built on complete self-reliance. No interference, no one gets a say. Letting someone else into personal decisions used to be unthinkable, not because they didn't trust people, but because they believed, "If I need someone, I can get hurt." But now, when they seek your opinion, not from weakness, but from a redefinition of together, that's when you know you're no longer on the sidelines. They begin to see you as integral to their future, not just in love, but in the very areas they once locked down: finances, career, long-term stability. And you'll notice the way they ask is different. It's not dismissive like, "Whatever you think is fine." It's genuine curiosity. "What direction do you think I should invest in? Which kind of work culture do you think suits me best?" And you realize they actually consider what you say. Maybe they don't follow it to the letter, but you can feel that your opinion has weight. And from someone who used to think, "I can do it all myself," that's deep trust. You'll even notice them linking you to their long-term plans. For instance, if they're thinking about moving to a new city, they won't just ask, "What do you think of that place?" They'll ask, "If I lived there, do you think you'd feel at home?" The question shifts from me to us. At a deeper level, this means they're dismantling internal walls. They're no longer preparing a future just for themselves. They're envisioning one that includes you, and they want to be sure you're an active participant, not just someone tagging along. When this happens, you won't need emotional declarations or flowery language, because the clearest sign of being chosen is this: they're building their future around you. When they begin asking for your input on major life choices, about home, finances, or the future, you start to feel truly considered. But even that isn't the final signal. One of the clearest signs that an avoidant has entered a new phase of emotional maturity is this: they begin talking about major relationship milestones with clarity and confidence. Gone are the vague responses, the hesitant phrases like, "I'm not sure yet," "Let's see how things go," or "Now's not the time to think about that." These are the replies that once left you feeling like you were the only one imagining a future. Now, things shift, not through grand promises, but through consistent, grounded answers to questions you have every right to ask. You might say, "Do you think about marriage?" And instead of a long pause or an evasive glance, they'll simply reply, "Yeah, I think one day I will, and I see that happening with you." Simple, decisive, not because they're trying to reassure you, but because they've thought about it, and they no longer fear commitment. For avoidance, commitment used to trigger a defensive shutdown. They didn't hate intimacy, but they feared disappearing in it, feared expectations, feared emotional timelines they couldn't control. But when they start speaking about big steps, living together, engagement, starting a family, with steady tone and zero tension, it means this: they're no longer feeling trapped at the thought of a long-term bond with you. They feel at peace, even right. This shift might move you deeply, especially if you remember how they once reacted. The same person who used to bristle at the word future now actively helps envision one, with you in it. You're not dragging, begging, or convincing them to commit. They commit because they feel ready. And what's striking in this stage is, you feel reassured not because they say it beautifully, but because they speak plainly, without fear of being misunderstood. They don't avoid. They don't need days to process. They don't leave the back door open with, "We'll see what happens." They speak like someone who has thought it through and chosen you clearly. This doesn't mean they're running to buy a ring tomorrow, but it does mean they've let you into the most guarded part of their emotional world, the space of long-term planning, of stability, of vulnerability. And when someone who once flinched at the word commitment can now say, "That makes sense to me," with you, you don't need any more convincing. It's not temporary comfort, it's growth. Loving someone with an avoidant attachment style can often feel like loving someone who's always 2 steps away, close enough to feel, but just far enough to stay out of reach. It makes you wonder, am I the only one dreaming about this? Do they really want this, or are they just temporarily comfortable? But if you're patient enough, if you're grounded enough not to turn love into a chase, if you can hold your boundaries while keeping your heart open, then one day you might witness the shift. Not a loud, dramatic change, not one filled with promises and declarations, but a quiet, steady unfolding. They start letting you lead. They prioritize you. They sit with you through serious conversations. They no longer fear your emotions. They seek your input, and they speak clearly about the future they once avoided. That's a process, a transformation. And above all, it's a conscious choice they make. No one forced them. No one begged. They changed because you were the person who made them want to grow, to trust, to stay. If you're seeing these signs in your partner, let yourself recognize them, but don't lose your clarity. Their transformation isn't just about them. It must be held in the container of your own values and emotional boundaries. Loving someone through growth doesn't mean waiting forever. It means standing firm while they learn how to step forward. And if you're not seeing these signs, remember this. You can't heal someone by abandoning yourself. The safety you crave must begin within you, and the person who is truly for you will come toward you, not leave you chasing. Thank you for staying until the end. If this helped bring clarity to your heart, hit that subscribe button, because I'll be here, helping you become the secure, grounded, deeply loved version of yourself that you've always deserved to be.